Hello. I should have known that y'all were going to want to dive right into the deep ocean of emotion and get right into shadow work. I'm actually relatively well versed in shadow work. I am someone who really strongly believes in alchemizing our pain, and so I have dove pretty deep into my own psyche to better understand myself and even some parts of myself that I didn't want to see, which I think will resonate into the Group 2 collective in particular. The one thing I want to provide a disclaimer on before we do get into shadow work, y'all, is that it's important to do this work in a space in which you have time to devote to the moment, and also be in a space where you are ready to hear the messages. Now, I don't think that the messages are going to come through too harshly in the Group 1 and Group 3 space based on the notes that channeled in with this energy. I was actually, when I was channeling, I was advised to do this layout with these cards. I didn't even shuffle these. It was just pick these cards. And what's really interesting about this pathway is that there is a narrative surrounding Scorpion energy, or the Scorpio energy, that talks about the Scorpion moving from this Scorpion-like energy all the way into the pathway of the dragon, and that sort of cycle of life and how that works for the Scorpio energy. And so it talks about being a scorpion, then moving into a hawk, then moving into the phoenix, and then rising into the dragon. And so I put the dragon out here on the side because it's very interesting. I heard this narrative, and I wish I knew which tarot reader I heard it from at one point, that talked about this pathway, because I don't know what I was doing, but I remember that I was in the middle of doing something and I was just sort of nonchalantly kind of listening to a reading. And then it's like I tuned in right when she was talking about this pathway. And what's crazy is as soon as I heard that, I sent it to the person that I was in a connection with that sort of catapulted a lot of what's been going on here. And I sent him this message. I was like, I just heard something that's really fascinating. And I told him about the Scorpio pathway, and he didn't even reply to it. And I was like, and I remember I was, I'm a notorious double texter in certain spaces. And I was like, so I sent after that, I was like, well, I thought it was cool, but anyway, he's like, and I don't even remember what he said now, but it's just funny because it's so interesting that it's so interesting to see things come full circle, because after I heard that dynamic of the pathway of the Scorpio moving into the dragon, I heard that come up several times following that, and then it was just like a thing, and it was interesting because I'm a Scorpio moon, and I have a Scorpio south node, and I have a Taurus north node. And so if you are familiar with the things that occur within the Scorpio south node and the pathway in order to get into the Taurus node, you do have a period in your past where you're a bit of a firecracker, a little bit, and just within the Scorpio energy, the Scorpio energy has a bit of a temper in its shadow, right? So it's interesting that that's the message that came up when I think about how just a few months ago it was the very first time I had heard that, and now here I am with a collective of people who have requested doing shadow work, and this same narrative comes up. Like, the synchronicities of life, y'all. Anyway, sorry, I just like totally side quested down that because I was in the middle of talking about how the messages are going to register within each collective before you get into it, sort of as a disclaimer. Um, I think that in group 1 and group 3, it's going to be an okay space. I think you're going to be able to handle the messages. I think it's going to come through with an understanding and awareness, and I think you will feel seen in those spaces. Group 2, I'm just going to advise you that if you are not ready to hear the truth on why you tapped into this energetic alignment, then you should probably find a fluffier reader, because I am not going to lie to you in this space. And I think that the messages that came up in the group 2 collective in particular will be shedding a light on some things that people that may tap into this collective might not want to hear. And but however, I do feel that, not to be biased or anything, but I do feel like the perfect guide for the group 2 collective, because I know the rarity of this alignment, and the rarity of the behaviors that exist within this alignment. And so I don't think that there are very many people actually operating in the world around you who legitimately understand you. And I have been in this space and had to see myself wholly in this space. So I do feel like you're not going to receive this message in very many spaces. So I hope you stick around. So, okay, so let's go ahead and dive into our shadow. How about here's group 1, group 2, and group 3. Group 1. Hello. Thank you for being here in this moment with me and for being ready to witness yourself and to face some aspects of yourself that maybe... Actually, here's the thing, group 1, is that I feel like the messages that are going to come through in your reading are going to help you to feel more seen than you have in previous spaces, because legitimately I feel like that's the work that needs to be done within your collective. So hang on one second. I need a drink of my water, because maybe I should have taken a little bit of a pause before just diving right into your reading. Okay. So I'm actually a little bit more prepared today than I usually am. Usually I sit down here and intuitively move, but I wanted to be a little bit more gentle today. And so when I was channeling what these messages were going to be about, the thing that came up in the group 2, I'm sorry, y'all, I don't know if you're in my collective timeline, there's a possibility that you've overcome the space in group 2, or that there's something there that needs to be shed light on. So it's going to be a heavier read in that space, but I don't know why sometimes I will be in this group and I'll say group 2 on accident. And if I'm in group 2, I'll say group 1 on accident. And that's, you two are the only ones that I do that with. I never do that in the group 3 space. So it has to be connected in some way. So just throwing that out there because I accidentally said that. The thing that come up in the group 1 collective is imposter syndrome. So a note that came in is, you may get noticed for what you do, but not who you are, or you may feel that way. The song that came in, which yours is the only space that had a song, was The Grand Optimist by City and Color. And the line that came out in particular was, Jack of all trades, who's a master of none. And it is being in this space of feeling as though we are unseen as an individual. So not being seen for our mind or our like things about us, but more so about what we do. So you might be in a collective that utilizes your creativity or your intelligence or something that you can do as sort of a way to deflect from being able or from being seen in your own authenticity, or to be recognized or to feel seen because you did not receive being seen for who you are. In this space, you are quite possibly went through a highly critical space within the developmental stages of life. There's a high probability that you had emotional neglect or physical abandonment, or a combination of the two of those. The highly critical space, though, I would say is what is most impactful within this collective, is being heavily criticized. Is what is going to put you into the imposter syndrome space. But also sort of the absence of a reward based system where the attention that lies within this space is typically out of sight, out of mind, right? And then it is sort of a show. It's like so I'm being like, I'm seeing right now a show horse. You know how a show horse has like that big wreath around their head? So it's kind of being in a space where the only recognition that you had in certain developmental stages was because of what you were able to do. It's like it was very achievement based. And so then it became this sort of space of being in, operating from a space of needing to achieve things in order to feel seen and validated. So, what's realistically in your shadow is a need to just be accepted without having to really do specific things, and or just being accepted because of who you are. Um, Being accepted for your your intellect or your looks or something in those lines that is kind of often just put to the sidelines, and people are more so fixated on your talents or your work ethic, is going to be what exists within the shadow space in the phoenix. And the interesting thing is that through there's also an element here, and that there, along with this imposter syndrome, is that there is this element of not seeing where people have pushed us down because they didn't want to see us rise, because they saw us already above them. They saw us on a pedestal already, and so they wanted to knock us off a pedestal. And that is something that your collective is sort of in a space of needing, or beginning to awaken to, and sort of needing to comprehend that sometimes people throw rocks at things that shine. And so your ability to achieve in the space that you do is because of the intellect that you have inside of you, or the tenacity that you have inside of you, or that there is something about you that naturally kind of draws people in, and that threatens those around you once they see you sort of rising. And so this imposter syndrome is essentially just having had those experiences, and yet also being in a space where the work that you do is it is so fulfilling, to you and to those around you, and that there actually are attributes to you that others wish they had, and so that places you in a very difficult space. And without having that foundation of self-confidence, by having this sort of highly critical upbringing or spaces of emotional neglect or an abandonment, it impacts your ability to see yourself in your own authenticity today. Okay, so let's go ahead and dive into I would rather not dive into the past. So, what I can tell y'all about doing shadow work in terms of looking back at the past. If there are spaces or situations or scenarios in which you feel that, okay, a a practice or something that you can do as a practice is to sort of look at the past. There are going to be situations that stand out in your timeline in the past that were really traumatizing. Those are pivotal moments because they change something about the way you see yourself. That's why they stuck in your memory, and that's why they're still there, sort of glued in and establish themselves as a part of who you are. What you can go and do now is go in your mind, okay? And as an adult who knows better, who can see things better, who knows what that child needed in that moment, you can go into those spaces in your mind. Remember, your mind is a very complex space. It doesn't always understand that it is in a space of illusion. And so you go back as an adult and you essentially correct things. You communicate with the child how they needed to communicate with them. You see them how they needed to be seen. You nurture them the way that they needed to be nurtured. And you give into yourself what you did not receive in those spaces. This is a really therapeutic thing to go back and sort of save yourself. It's really empowering, actually, and I highly recommend it. So I don't personally want to dive into the past and to talk about the past because you will know, okay? You will already know. And why do we need to rehash this? This isn't about that. It's about how do we build upon the why, right? How do we build upon the reason that we are operating in this space? So we are going to get you messages on how you can alchemize within your shadow. And the one thing I want to express about this particular collective, okay, being that you are in this state of imposter syndrome, is that you are powerful manifestors. I don't know a whole lot of life path information, but I am a life path 5. And I have learned that life path 5s deal very well in karma. They're very good at sort of dealings with how karma is provided and received, and are very good at sort of alchemizing surrounding energetic alignment. So if you do know your life path, that would be really helpful for you to kind of understand what you are, where you are intended, or what you can use to your benefit. Another thing that I think you should look into is figuring out what your north node is. Once you figure out your north node and you begin to embody that, then you can really sort of push forward. My north node is in Taurus, and I don't remember what house it is, but when I sat down and did a deep dive on it, it talked about how I was to be, that my, how do I explain it? It was that my space of empowerment, or how I was going to move into my north node and sit in it comfortably, is to basically be a spiritual healer and to be in the occults. And I had been a wedding photographer for 13 years, and I decided to do a tarot channel. So, and y'all have been here for that. So once you decide to follow that space and to really dive deep into understanding, and this may be a pivotal moment for you. This may be a moment in which you are sort of bringing that into balance. This may be a moment where you are intended to, well, we already know you're here for the pivot. But it's sort of this indication that doing this work and getting passionate about it is going to bring you into this space of fulfilling connections. Okay, so right now, within this space, there's a lot of not trusting our intuition. Sometimes, group 1, you have to recognize that if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. And sometimes we can be in spaces where we're fighting to feel seen and fighting to feel validated and fighting to feel comprehended, in a space where comprehension is technically something that we would have to teach the room around us, and building into an awareness that we all sort of operate at our own levels of comprehension. This being a collective that may delve pretty strongly into complex thought, you may find yourself in this space or in this moment where you disconnect so much from being in a space of sort of being inspired in the environment around you and moving into an awareness that you might be the you might be the inspiration. Um, there, you have been in a space of not trusting your own intuition. And it has a lot to do with these external experiences. It has a lot to do with the invalidation, a lot to do with the imposter syndrome, a lot to do with the experiences we've had where, um, I think that there are many within this collective that probably have the experience where people either love you or hate you, and it's one or the other. And I would argue, I've already seen several of the followers I have within this collective, and many of you are beautiful. Um, when you are in that space, it's so interesting that they have that pretty girl privilege, right? Is something that is, I think, very misunderstood, because I would argue that many pretty girls actually do not um, have as much privilege as our society tends to think that they do. One thing that exists within that space is that there is this assumption that you must be told all the time that you're beautiful. So obviously that's something that happens and occurs on an often basis, but actually it's not as common. Um, and also it is oftentimes that when someone is good looking, they almost have to work twice as hard in order to be seen for their talents. And the other interesting thing is, there could be some of you within this collective who had who like kind of rose into your confidence within self or appearance. And so there is this weird sort of um I hate that I use the word dichotomy so much, but I just love that word. And so there is this sort of dichotomy, though, between, I guess it's sort of being treated as though you must know that you might get attention for appearance, and then the reality that you don't, and that you weren't built in that space, that you kind of blossomed into yourself, right? A late bloomer, as they would say. And that the confidence you have within that space wasn't something that you always had. So there's a whole underbelly within you that has insecurities around um, really being seen in a raw space, and sort of being more comfortable hiding behind a creative outlet or an achievement. And so then when you're in a space of being noticed for uh, different attributes about you that don't have anything to do with your talents, it can be a really scary place to be. And it's also a misconstrued space as well, where you will have experiences where you are treated a certain way just because of how you look, which is not okay. And that can go both ways. That can be that you are treated a certain way because you look, because there are certain things that about appearance in particular, that maybe there are sort of negative belief systems around, or that, one thing is weird is that I have the actual experience of being an obese woman and being a woman who is not. And so I actually do know the difference on how women who are overweight who are treated within society versus those who are not. And it is a much different experience. It is a vastly different experience, actually. And I'm not here to argue on that topic. I do feel that for me personally, in my personal journey, was having to wake up to the reality that I needed to recognize what was unhealthy within myself. And I couldn't very well be in a space where I was encouraging others to essentially lie to me and coddle me through it when they knew that what I had been doing was unhealthy for myself and for my well-being. So there are varying spaces to be in here, but ultimately the biggest space that we are in is feeling as though we have to present ourselves through something that we're doing instead of just being. In this space, though, you are a powerful manifester once you build into your intuitive body. Once you sort of working with your intuition, it's very easy for us in this space to become overthinkers, and to sort of be in this space in which we are dwelling a bit on this need to feel seen in particular. And it's interesting because with the Ten of Wands here, I see the Ten of Wands in the traditional tarot as sort of hanging on to the past and taking it with us. And there's a lot within the shadow that is impacting your ability to see yourself in your own authenticity and to be able to see yourself more realistically. Now, the interesting thing that I think that could help this collective in particular is finding a tribe of people that see you for who you are. And it's, or finding community in that sense where you begin feeling seen for a part of you that you feel is sort of misunderstood or isn't being seen in the light that it is intended to be seen in. So, I just had this very interesting experience this morning or last night. I posted something on my personal Facebook account and nobody responded to it. And I post a video here and I have like 30 comments and people that are like very tuned in. So sometimes also Collective One, it's about, like, I've talked about a hype team in the past, but really it is about sort of knowing who sees you, where they see you, and knowing what spaces in which you're seeking validation and you don't feel it reciprocated back to you, or you don't feel seen in certain spaces. I have such a disconnect with that app in particular. And the funny thing is that the people that are on my friends list, my quote unquote friends list, right, on that social media platform are all people who actually know me. The majority of them know me in person. And it's like crickets if I say something half the time. Now I post something about my children and everybody is like, oh, yeah. But if I just give my personality in that space, it's as though nobody wants to support that. It's just a weird energy and weird alignment. And I used to get tripped up in that space realistically. So, finding your sort of space, finding the community or the space in which you do feel that you are being seen correctly or in your own authenticity, or there is people around you that are encouraging you. You know, I'm sorry, group one, that I talk about my experiences the most in this collective, but I do feel like I resonate into all the spaces, but um this is one that's really heavy for me. Um so I feel like it's important to share those experiences so that you kind of have a relatability in this space so that we better understand one another, A, and what we're working through, B. Um, oh my gosh, what was I going to say? I don't know, maybe I'll come back to it, but um, I'm sorry, I have ADHD, so um, so I can side quest a thought pretty easily. Especially if I'm channeling, because then it kind of just disappears altogether because I interrupt the channel. Um, oh my goodness. Hype team, thank you. I went into this space in which I will only give the deeper aspects of myself and the more personal elements of myself to very specific people in this moment today. I used to just share. I've always been a writer, right? So I would just share all my thoughts, and I realized that I was sort of handing out matches to those around me, that were not necessarily my friends. They were nosy acquaintances at best in some spaces. And here I was just handing a nosy acquaintance a match to light a fire underneath me by being a sort of an oversharer, right, in certain spaces. And so recognizing where you feel seen is really important, because the more that you show up in those spaces, the more that you will understand what it is that you need within connections and to develop a hype team. I heard about the hype team from the book By the Fucking Lilies. Um, and she talks about having a team of people that you go to who are supportive of you. Now, I am a tough love person myself, so I have I have a best friend who will tell it like it is, but she will also be the first person to provide me words of encouragement and support and help me through a moment, and really offer advice, because I'm the type of person that I really like to like work through problems, right? So I want like solutions or things to think about and ideas, right? And so there are times where I'll connect in with her and she'll just kind of remind me who I am in a moment. She'll just pick me up a little bit. And we need that around us. And so recognizing A, those who provide that to you, and B, those who seem to move in a space that seems to enjoy you being down or enjoys others being down. So, kind of avoiding those gossipy spaces. I think that's really bad for the psyche of someone that might have imposter syndrome, A, because I don't think you're going to be able to trust those people realistically. And then um, this will help you with the foundations, okay, of building into trusting yourself more, and moving into an energy where you are being validated without having to try. So you're not having to work and work and work and work and work to feel validation in those spaces. Solid friendships they can change your life. So having a support system around you that just validates you as who you are, not what you do. I have been a wedding photographer for 13 years, and do you know how many times that my best friend has been like, "You're an amazing photographer"? Almost none. Like, we don't talk about that kind of stuff. And that's not why we have a solid relationship. She doesn't talk about, I mean, she's obviously told me I'm talented, and I've told her that she's talented, but those are not the basis of our conversations aren't surrounding that kind of stuff. And so it's knowing where you have a built-in support system, and knowing, and also, unfortunately, group one is being able to disconnect in spaces where you are not feeling seen as well, and recognizing that there are some spaces that need to have a little bit of distance between them, that for whatever reason you don't connect, you don't there's a communication barrier. And it's not that those spaces might not shift and mold and change, and that you may be able to communicate again more effectively, but some connections and some situations need a break, right? To better understand self. All right, I'm going to get you some message cards. I don't think that with this, because the message is already so heavy in these spaces, it's just, and I already know that the energy that I'm going to have to tap into in the next collective, y'all. And realistically, like, in terms of the shadow work that you have to do, I think it's the majority of it in this collective, realistically collective one, is that you just need to trust yourself. It's like the biggest message that we have in this space is not only trust yourself, but see yourself more authentically. This is, confidence building techniques is something that would really help this collective the most, is doing things that make you feel more confident. Now, if you do have insecurities surrounding certain elements, you need to get honest with yourself. Just as a woman who's been in a space where I have been where I've had a bit of body dysmorphia, I guess, I can attest that that is a space that it was sort of like, this is how it worked for me, and I don't know how it'll work probably very similarly for you as well, where there is like, where all of these other areas were so much easier to work on, right? It was easy for me realistically to dive into the intellectual side of things and look at things complexly and dissect behavioral patterns. That was quite simple. Well, it wasn't simple, but it was easier than looking at myself and going, oh, well, you have to put work into this particular space, and it's the hard work. It's the work that you're kind of been avoiding. And that was my relationship with my body. And so it is also, there has to be something that keeps you in this state of insecurity surrounding your ability to be seen in your authenticity, and whatever that is for you, and then working on that and working on your relationship with that particular thing. That, we've talked on here several times now, where the solution to the problem is in the problem, and the solution to the resistance is within the resistance. If you're feeling some type of way about yourself, then that is the area that needs worked on the most. And sometimes that requires a lot of hard work. Don't I know that? I get whatever it takes to get closer to consciousness. Yeah. It's because there is some sort of insecurity that's sitting within the psyche. And you will know it. It doesn't have to be in relationship to your body, but for many women it realistically is, and I know that. And so then it's like, okay, well, then we have to get disciplined in that space, and you have to build confidence in the space that you have insecurity the most. And so whatever that is for you, dissect it, and then research methods on building confidence and confidence building within those spaces. Because one element is, and there's another aspect too of self-acceptance along the way, okay? Because it's easy to beat ourselves up when we are on a path or on a journey of bettering ourselves, right? And we're doing the work, right? But it just is maybe it's a slow process, or there are defeating moments. And being able to love yourself through every part of it, and getting out of the headset or the mindset that is, I have to essentially look like this or be like this in order to feel accepted. And really getting to a space of being able to accept ourselves in the moment, but also being honest with ourselves. If we don't accept ourselves in that space, then it's obviously something that needs worked on. Okay, let me get you these messages. I already read the first one. When I lean toward love, I am led. What's this one? Attack, pain, fear, judgment, and any form of separation are merely calls for help. And this is interesting because I do feel like this is a collective that maybe has experienced quite a lot of projection, where other people's sort of issues within self have been projected onto you. And this can really bring you, this can bring us down even more, being in a space of feeling even more insecure about self, right? And not understanding sort of why we are being placed in these situations and these scenarios. But it is really about the relationship that we have with self. The fourth one is my outer appearances are a reflection of my internal condition. Yeah. And that's a big one, is really being honest with ourselves in those spaces. I had to be so honest with myself in that space. I had to really look at my lifestyle and recognize that what I was doing was not healthy. It wasn't. And more importantly, it was impacting how I was treated in relationships. Like, I was treated the way I was treating myself, and being able to recognize that that's being reflected back to us, that the relationship that we have with ourselves is how others will treat us too, because that's what we've accepted for ourselves. And so we have to get into a space in which our relationship with self is solid. And part of that is really looking at ourselves authentically. We can be in this world around us that is coddling everything, but we know it's not true. We know that it's just words, and that many people operating in that space don't even believe what they're saying. They just feel obligated to say it, because if they say anything outside of that, we live in a cancel culture too. And you know what I'm talking about. And I know, as a woman who has struggled in a certain area, I don't believe for 1 second that the society around me agrees that it's okay that I'm unhealthy, or that I'm making poor choices with myself. I don't think that. And you know why I don't think that? Because I exist in the real world, and I operate in the real world. I know how people have treated me and how I have been treated in spaces because of the lifestyle that I had accepted for myself at one point. So we have to be realistic, okay? That a lot of things that are projected to us on the internet or within a system are really, they're sort of encouraging, in my opinion, the antithesis of growth. They're encouraging that we be accepted without having to face ourselves, and without having to better ourselves, and without having to understand the spaces that we're in and allowing ourselves to be in. And also, they seem to be encouraging a bit of delusion. So we really have to be also aware of what, the content around us is sort of telling us in comparison to how it really feels. Um, and then the last thing is, there is nothing sexier than my authentic truth. Bam. That's true. And I know that there are many in this space that have moved in this disconnect with feeling seen for their authenticity, and sort of feeling that there is a wall, right, between how people see you and how things really are. And there's another hit here too, is that we have to get out of being so concerned about what other people think. And I know that's harder to do than It's easier said than done, right? I personally have rejection sensitive dysphoria for my ADHD, and that's really difficult. Just having ADHD is difficult because a lot of people think that that's not, they stigmatize it. And so that as well, if you're in that space and you have ADHD as well, then I know that there's a lot of misinformation about there on that topic as well. So this is your shadow reading. These are the things that are sort of within your shadow that need worked on. If you are into journaling, some journal prompts that I would really recommend is doing that work, right, and going back in and sort of, you can do that internally. You don't have to write that down necessarily. Going into those spaces and validating yourself in the moments that you felt that you weren't being seen or that you were being pushed down in those more critical moments. Recognizing that the criticism that we received doesn't define us. And it has a lot more to do with the other person than it does to do with us. It has so much more to do with their relationship with themselves than it does in the relationship that we have with ourselves. No one who cares about your feelings is going to say things to you to push you down and then feel good about it, So, or is going to criticize you in that capacity without it being something that they feel about themselves. That's a projection, okay? And so now that you know that it's a projection, you can go back and you can sort of remind your inner child of that. Because really, shadow work is a lot of inner child healing. The other thing is to get real with yourself, okay? So, and be honest with yourself. Don't sit and lie to yourself. Don't make up. The thing about affirmations, okay, is that they're only effective if you believe them. So you can sit down and you can write down, I am beautiful and I am this and I am that. But it's about the feeling in it, right? That's how energetic alignment works. So until you have attached a feeling to it. So if you actually put down the word, I'm grateful, but you don't feel grateful, then the word grateful realistically doesn't register in the way that true gratitude registers within your energetic alignment. So it misconstrues within the alignment of energy, and it's like, oh, okay, so we are grateful for things that don't that are the opposite of things that we would legitimately feel grateful for, right? So being honest with yourself is really important in this space. And the other element here as well is to recognize that there are parts of you, there are the achievements that you've had and the talent that you have or the creativity that you have and the way that you have moved and operated in space is something that is rare. And it's a reminder that you worked hard to be in that space. Many within this collective have already done a lot of work. You've already worked really hard to be where you are today. And so now it's just believing that you deserve to be in the space that you are. And then building confidence. Confidence is realistically the shadow work that is existing in the entire collective of this whole, of all three groups, is self-confidence. That's the biggest contributor to this space. So getting real with yourself and being, okay, if I was in my most confident state, what would I look like? What would things around me look like? What kind of relationships would I have? And then write that down as though it is occurring in the moment, and then work on believing it, and then start putting in the work to achieve it. And then don't look back, and know that if you really want to have that self-confidence and you want to build into that space and you want to feel as though you are in your most authentic self and you are able to see yourself in your own authenticity, that until you face those things about yourself that you're not willing to face in some moments, or you're aware of but don't want to accept, that is something that needs work done, then you will continue to feel that way, right? All right, group one, thank you so much for being here. If this resonated with you and you'd like to see more content from me, please like and subscribe to my channel. I am so close to reaching 1,000 subscribers. I think it's like just over 200 subscribers, and I can get to that benchmark, which is the next goal that I have for this channel, which I'm trying to utilize to help support my kids as a single mom with 3 kids. So any amount of support that you provide me in this moment is very beneficial to me and to my family. And plus, I'd love to have you stick around and stay a while and be a part of the collective. So thank you so much for being here, group one. Enjoy the rest of your day. Group two. Group two. You know what? I'm going to tell you about something. Before I am able to tap into the energetic alignment within this collective, I have to do an entire ritual. And sometimes I have questioned why I am choosing to remain a guide for this collective energy. And I think the reason is because no one ever had the balls to tell me that I behaved a certain way. because they were too afraid to. And so I actually know exactly what it's like to be in the Scorpion energy. And I know what it's like to be knocked down a peg in the Scorpion energy. And to witness an ego death in the Scorpion energy. So I want to give a disclaimer to this collective before we even get into the reading, that your shadow work is something that you might not be ready for. And unfortunately, until you're ready to hear this and see this, it will continue to impact every relationship that you have in your life until you are able to witness yourself. In my humble opinion, now I'm not an expert, but it's my experience within this specific alignment. So, now that we have provided the disclaimer, the channeled notes that came out when I was sitting down and writing notes for this collective is this is a collective that certain aspects of self are going to suffer from Dunning-Kruger. Dunning-Kruger is the antithesis of imposter syndrome. So imposter syndrome is where we overachieve in our talent. And actually, you know, here's the thing, collective one, I think you also may suffer from imposter syndrome as well. I think there's a duality within this collective. Okay, so this may resonate into you as well. But anyway, the bigger aspect of your shadow, the more difficult aspect for you to face is on the other side. Because I think some of you may be aware of your own imposter syndrome. You may be aware that you sort of hide behind things that you can do, or, you know, being in a creative space, or not feeling seen for who you are and just what you do, right? But there's a side of you that knows yourself, right? You know your emotional intelligence. You know, this is important apparently, because here's train confirmation. You know your emotional intelligence. You know your tenacity. You know your, in some cases, it is though not necessarily that you know your worth, but it's more so that you think you know your worth. And that there is this relationship with self that doesn't want to face its own shadow. Dunning-Kruger is where we think more highly of ourselves than we actually act. When I was writing down the messages that came in with this collective energy, it is not understanding our own toxicity. And if y'all have been here for a second, you know I hate the word toxic, so I don't want to say it that way. But I know that some of you throw that word around like confetti. And so I think it's the one word that I felt like, well, that will they will hear that. Now, the important thing to understand is that the reason that this exists oftentimes is being in a highly critical state in the developmental stages of life, being highly criticized in important developmental stages, also experiencing an absence of nurturing, almost no nurturing, and emotional neglect. And oftentimes that is also coupled in with physical abandonment. So it is sort of an all-encompassing space of having to have been placed in literally figuring yourself out and doing everything alone in terms of understanding the world around you. And because of those experiences, the awareness that was built into the world around you is that everything sucks and everybody sucks, and I don't trust anybody, but I trust myself. But in building that trust with self, some of us have built in an arrogance that doesn't see ourselves. We can get caught up in pointing fingers, and it's very easy for us actually to be in this collective alignment and to look at everybody else and look at their behaviors and look at what they're doing and look at how they're behaving and look at what they say and what they do and how they treat us. And it's all just the fact that we have that much energy to be able to look at everybody else and judge them means that there's a hell of a lot that we're avoiding judging within ourselves. This is a collective that is often vocal, abrasive, unwavering in their belief systems, is me-centered, and oftentimes projects their own insecurities onto others and makes it their problem to deal with. This is a collective that would utilize word daggers, which for me, word daggers are if someone hurts us, then we utilize very strong words and very crude words that we wouldn't be able to handle if somebody said to us. And we don't see it as a problem because of the behavior that the other person displayed. And so therefore, we feel entitled to call people certain things and say certain things and make certain statements and be verbally assaulting to other people. Knowing darn well that if anyone spoke to us in the way that we speak to others, we would have zero tolerance for it. So why are we tolerating ourselves in that space? Oh. This is hard. The experiences that we have within relationships within this collective, the reason they are the way they are is we don't want to see ourselves for the bully within us and within our shadow. And that the disconnect isn't always everybody else. Sometimes we are pushing people away because part of the shadow within this is that it's such a fear of getting hurt that it literally will hurt itself before ever allowing somebody else to hurt us. And it pushes people away and then blames them for their response. And blames them for their behavior towards us without even remotely, oftentimes, witnessing ourselves. And the thing is, group 2, they're all afraid to tell you that. They're afraid to tell you that you're abrasive and mean. Because if they do, they're so fearful of your response and how much you're going to overreact by being called out for what you are and how you operate. Now, I happen to know that it's a defense mechanism, that it's a mode of survival, and that actually there's a lot of internal pain that isn't being addressed. And it's very, in some spaces and within some alignments, it is so disconnected even with knowing and understanding even what unconditional love feels like, because it's been so absent in many of these alignments. I can tell you that I didn't feel legitimately, I didn't understand what unconditional love felt like until I was an adult. I had no idea that it felt that way. Because empathy, in my opinion, requires an experience to be able to know what it feels like, right? And it's not that I didn't know that I was loved in certain spaces, but I wasn't loved in the way that I needed to be in certain spaces either. And I didn't feel nurtured. And I had to come to terms with that it really impacted who I was and how I behaved as a person and why I was so chaotic. Because I used to be in this space. I used to be really, really abrasive. And what happened was that I ended up hurting somebody that I actually really cared about because I didn't trust them. And then I realized that in that situation, every other space I had been in before, it was everybody else was the problem, right? But then I was in a space that was, you are the problem. And if I can help someone avoid that experience by getting you into a space that softens with yourself beforehand, then I guess we'll go into that shadow work with you, because that is the shadow work of this collective. Whether or not you want to accept it, that's up to you. You know, you very well could look at this and be like, this is harm, and I already know. And it's difficult for me to be in this space too, because I feel like this is really deep territory for a YouTube video, you know? And I don't want you to feel like I'm coming down on you, or even sometimes I see comments from this collective, and even in the comments sometimes I'm just understand that space. And I really, you know, it's also moving from a space too that is, it's so unwavering in our beliefs as well. It's like, it's feeling so concrete in how we see the world around us that it's like everyone else is wrong and we're right kind of vibe. And I'm here to tell you that your shit does stink, baby. You know? Your shit stinks too. So I warned you before coming into this space, group 2, and just like, let's take you out of this muck for a moment, okay? That is the pathway of the lotus flower, right? The lotus flower sits in mud. That's the lotus flower's environment. is mud and muck and gunk and dirt, and that is how it blossoms and blooms into the flower that it is. In order for a butterfly to become a butterfly, it has to disintegrate in acid. I mean, imagine how fucking painful that is. But until you face yourself, it's going to be almost impossible to rise above it. And it has to get out of the space of being in the defense all the time. Your threshold for moving in survival is so narrow in this energy. So the shadow work that you have is to look at yourself and the relationships around you and see where you are the problem in them. Hold on, let me word that correctly. See which spaces in which you are being the problem. You are not the whole problem, okay? Nobody is saying that. And because it takes two to tango in a lot of those spaces. But understand where, we are repeating the cycle, because if you were heavily neglected, you have to be very careful then on how you interact in those with relationships with those around you, because in this me-centered space, it can be very easy to move into cycles where the focus is only on you and what you need, and it's all about you. Because you are very capable of pushing everyone away. It needs to balance this space out. And the thing is that once you go through this ascension into, blossoming and emerging as the butterfly that you are, because you are, your ability to manifest in that space is, because listen, collective too, you are energetically tapped into a space that not a lot of people know what it feels like. That's why you're so isolated, realistically. That's why so many people don't understand you. That's why so many people don't know how you feel or what you've been through or anything, because they haven't been through it too. They weren't treated the way that you were treated, and nobody is saying that how you were treated was okay. But in this energetic alignment, first of all, there are so few people, especially in our society here, that are operating in this energy, that realistically, that are operating in this space, that know empathetically what this feels like. I know what this feels like. And I know what it's like to be in this space, and I know what it's like to be blind in this space. But when you move out of it, your ability to manifest, because you relate into such a vast amount of energy, is insane. And it also allows you to sympathize and empathize in spaces many people can't. I guarantee that this is a collective that it would, well, it's hit or miss here, because there are some of you that would hand out $10 to a homeless person in a heartbeat, and I feel like there might be a couple others that would be like, have such a misconstrued vantage point on looking at the homeless. But I think that many of you actually would look into situations where you would definitely be among the collective that would root for the underdog. And that's the thing, is that you are passionate. You do have a big heart, but your heart is also guarded by like a chain link barbed wire fence, baby. And you got to see that, because that is one of the biggest hiccups of you being able to accept better for yourself, is being so guarded. And really what you're projecting out, that kind of energy, projecting out that negativity is only going to be reciprocated back to you. And you're just going to continue to move into that alignment. So you have to get out of it. So, realistically, the shadow work that exists within this collective is just bringing into balance our own behaviors too. I think you're honestly already on the pathway of being able to build boundaries and what to accept for yourself, and just make sure that we're not so rigid and so wavering that we're pushing everybody away still, and we're sort of even more so avoiding the things that we need to work on within ourselves and the areas and the spaces in which we need to soften. This collective in particular really needs to spend some time looking in the mirror and really understanding the why behind operating in this space. It's unfortunate because there's a lot in this collective that I know nobody deserves to have to have been through. And so, one thing that you can do for shadow work in terms of inner child work is you can go back into those moments in which you were feeling neglected or criticized, or that you weren't important. And you can put love into yourself in those spaces. So sort of in your mind, because your mind is a powerful tool and doesn't always understand it's an illusion. You can go back into the memories of those moments and come back in as your sort of savior, come back into those spaces and be the person that you needed for yourself and choose yourself in those moments. The one thing you're being advised to do in this work is to slow down and really dissect yourself authentically. And this is hard. This is one of the hardest. I already know that among the shadow work within these collectives, this is the hardest one. This is the toughest one. And this one really knocks us down a peg. This one really knocks us off balance. But it is necessary. I love y'all. I know that this is tough stuff. But until you face it and work on it, it's going to have a big impact on your ability to connect in with healthy spaces and people that are willing to provide you the unconditional love that you seek. And you have to be in a space that is providing yourself unconditional love as well. Are you operating from unconditional love realistically? That's something to dissect. Okay, group 2. I am going to get you some message cards, and then I think we'll close out this reading. This is a bit of a heavier space for me to be in, and I don't know. It's not so bad. I really wish that somebody would have been in this space with me at the point that I was in this moment and told me this, because it would have really saved me from a lot of heartache. So if I can be that for you, then so be it. Only if you're willing to hear it. I think you'll hear it, even if it feels some type of way. Because I think if I had heard this message when I needed to hear it, could have really helped. Okay, so you could use some self-care time like now. schedule it in. Yeah, I bet. Check in with your body and release any tension you are carrying. There is one hit here too about our individual insecurities and understanding maybe why we might be in certain spaces still. And to really face that as well. I do think in some element there might be something for you in the group 1 space. I did accidentally say group 2 in that space, and I do that a lot between your collectives. If you notice that, I'll accidentally say collective 1 and I'll accidentally say collective 2, and I only do that with your 2 collectives. So I think you're connected into those spaces. I really do feel like they're the 2 elements within group 1 and group 2 are the collectives that I resonate into and am able to channel for from a state of personal, where I connect into it and I resonate into it. So I do feel like they're both path lines and timelines that I have been in. That's why I can energetically tap into them so well. And so I do feel like there's a part of, your lighter attributes are actually in the group 1 space. And in fact, I would advise y'all from this point forward, if your knee-jerk reaction is to tap into the pile 1 space, or I'm sorry, pile 2 space, to go ahead and listen to pile 1 as well, because I often feel that there are messages there for you as well. Okay, anyway. And then we have listen to your body and do what it is asking of you. Yeah. All right, collective 2. I'm sorry. I know that was a little bit. I'm almost 100% positive that there may have been a good few of you who weren't anticipating hearing that specific message. So I just want you to know that I love y'all. I see you. I understand this space. And if you want to talk about it, this is a judgment-free zone. My email is in the description box. You're more than welcome to email me and talk about it. But if you just want to be around for more content, please like and subscribe to my channel. Leave me a comment down below. Any amount of support that you can help me in this moment, or that you can provide me in this moment, helps me and this channel on reaching the next milestone and being in a space that I might be able to use this to help support my family. So thank you so much for being here, group 2. Hello, group 3, collective 3. What's up, homies? My group 3 collective. Y'all are so supportive, and I understand why, because getting into your shadow work and writing down, I already kind of knew that this was going to be the energy that came in for your shadow work. And I just felt it was interesting because when I was channeling for your collective, I was like, this just makes so much sense that they're like this, because they're the most supportive bunch that I have. It's always the group 3 collective that is the first ones to sort of like the video, the first ones to comment, the first ones to be here supporting me. The messages that come in from the group 3 collective are always so giving, and it's, wouldn't it be that your shadow work has to do with being overgivers? It's like, you don't say. Now, I will say that your capacity to give is beautiful in my opinion. But what your shadow aspects are is about self-sacrificing and being selfless to a default. One shadow element that I did kind of channel in was may harbor resentment over not doing things for themselves, but struggle to take the initiatives to do those things. Fear-based, very fear-based. Moving from a space of there's a real absence of self-worth that comes into this space in the group 3 space in terms of the shadow. So it's about diving into the why. Why are we so self-sacrificing? And getting into guilt as one. Getting into this space of why we fear. I find it interesting, and I've said this already once, is that the Group 3 Collective, in terms of being able to write me the most beautiful messages on social media, tends to, it seems as though they fear their own voice and fear their own authenticity. You are givers and nurturers. I would argue that many of you probably have an acts of service or gift giving love language. Many of you are in that space. And many of you are in a over nurturing space. I wouldn't necessarily say it's over nurturing, it's over giving. It is feeling as though it is sort of a pathway to validation. It is feeling relatively unseen, and then the only way that we feel seen or appreciated or recognized is by doing something for someone else and making someone else feel good. But at what cost is sort of it's okay. First of all, being selfless and being nurturing and being giving and being solid and stable in that space, I would argue, is not an easy space to be in. First of all, I think there are many more people who struggle with being able to be so selfless. So it's interesting that your issue is your selflessness, but it's you're givers in a world of takers. And something that I think that we need to understand is in that space is we can very easily become enablers. It's like we want to make sure that everyone is feeling good and everyone is happy. And that has something to do with our own self. There was a period of time, likely in developmental stages, where we didn't feel safe. We didn't feel there was some sense of loss, right, that occurred in those spaces that really knocked us off balance. Okay, or an overlapping and sense of loss where this occurs throughout various stages, where it seems that there is the reality that at any point or in any moment or in any that there could be loss or grief or a missed opportunity, or that someone might be upset with us if we do something for ourselves, and that it's going to be seen as selfish. You may have been called selfish. You may have been called a brat. You know, there may have been moments in your timeline that you were misconstrued, that you were considered the opposite, you know, that you were considered selfish, and perhaps that built into this space of really making sure that the way in which you operated was a space in which you didn't behave selfishly, that you then moved into a space of moving selflessly to a default. Really easily influenced by the opinions around us, and also having a disconnect with allowing ourselves to feel seen. It's very easy in this environment, in this space, to kind of put ourselves on the back burner, right? And make sure that everyone else is kind of pushed to the forefront, and everyone else is being taken care of, and everyone else is happy and content. And then there's you being there holding everybody up. And there has to build into an awareness that sometimes the healthiest thing that we can be for someone is to not be their crutch. You know, you are among the collective that's, I can't imagine that you've never heard, I don't know what I would do without you. And here's the thing, Collective 3. What are they going to do without you? Because are we in a space that is enabling behaviors in others because we don't want to let them fall? But more than that, it's about, why have we moved into this space in which our idea of love is based very heavily upon being of service to others? And where in that space is there an opportunity for us to be of service to ourselves? This collective, realistically, it's like, I feel like I already know what's in your shadow, because in your shadow is sort of you. Here we have the Queen of Wands in reverse. This woman who has no passion for life and no passion for herself. It's always being in a space of being of service, of what can I do for somebody else. And that is the pathway for this woman here in this space to feel better about herself. Well, what are we avoiding in self that we can't feel balanced, and is, you know, making us feel as though we're not strong enough to move into our own authenticity? In this space, in the shadow aspect, there's a lot of inner turmoil. There's a lot of internalized conflict and not just internalized conflict, but also not standing up for ourselves, sort of pushing down those emotions. And someone in the comments the other day said something about like putting a corkscrew on emotions, and it reminded me of like putting a tap on the ocean and expecting it to, or like a geyser, right? Like Yellowstone, like putting, now don't do that. Don't go anywhere near it, because I think it'll like melt your skin off. Like, not to be weird, but you know, but imagine them putting a cork in that. And then eventually it's going to blow and it's all going to come out then. And I feel like many of you are in this brewing space in this moment where the emotions that you are sort of sticking a corkscrew on, or that you have stuck a corkscrew on for so long, are eventually gonna come out. And so you have been in this moment for quite a while of like holding on to the faith that somebody is going to see your effort while you're incessantly on the sidelines. It's really difficult to see people that are behind the curtain. Do you know what I mean? Collective 3. So if you would like to be seen, you're going to have to step into the spotlight a little bit, don't you think? There are elements of you that have been held back out of fear. There's some sort of internalized insecurity around self-worth in particular. And really seeking, not even necessarily seeking, I think that some of the ways in which you have perhaps been validated have so little to do with who you are internally, who you are as a person. It's more about, things that can be seen on the surface, right? On either looks or the ways in which we operate. So how feeling a sense of how do I word this? Feeling a sense of fulfillment in sort of being of service to others. Now, I'm actually going to argue, group 3, that you are intended to be of service to others, but in a way that is actually fulfilling for self as well. So I think that in terms of these are the healers among us, right? I think that you actually are very capable of helping others, and that this would be a beautiful space for you. But it is about being able to help others in a way in which they appreciate it is really important in this space, because we have been in spaces here in this collective where it is being of service to others at our own expense, and there's no reciprocity whatsoever. So it takes out the ability to even feel good about it when you're surrounded by people that don't appreciate it. And then, even though you're naturally giving and you're in this space of giving without necessarily expecting anything in return, it gets old where it's just expected of you. And then it's like, what am I here for but to be of service to you? And so really, I think y'all know already that your shadow is to be of service to yourself. How can you move from your state of nurturing and give to others in a way that you will be received and appreciated? And more importantly, how are you giving to others? Is your delivery off base? Are you more so like in terms of gift giving? Do you just give things like monetary things, right? And do you offer then, are you complimentary? Do you give people words of encouragement? People that you care about and are close with, do you nurture them with words of affirmation? Because that's something that people are receptive to, right? And it's actually more rewarding for the both of you, because those sort of monetary hits are so fleeting, right? And they at some point they lose value, because when we just keep giving people things, right? It doesn't tend to stick as much as if we were giving them something that they could actually benefit from. So what about delivery? And more importantly, where are you giving to yourself in those spaces? Where are you nurturing yourself in those spaces? And also, where is your hand being held out with expectation? Because is it that people around you are appreciative of the things that you're doing, or are they just expecting it of you? That's a big thing as well. So within your shadow, it is understanding primarily guilt, I would say, is one that exists the most within this space. Why is it that we feel guilty being in spaces where the only thing that we have to concern ourselves with in that moment is ourselves and not others? And how much of this does this have to do with being in a space of fawning? Fawning is something that I think y'all should look into. Because in many spaces in this collective, it reminds me of being a doormat a little bit. What happened to put you in a space of allowing yourself to be walked all over and feeling that that's okay and that you deserve that? Because there's something in there too about this relationship with self, in which we have built into our subconscious, or our subconscious, that the sort of being like beating ourselves up in some capacity at all times is acceptable, and that it's okay for us to kind of be a punching bag to life, and it's just not. So I would go, some of the inner child work that I have addressed in the other collectives that helps us to kind of understand some of the elements that occurred within developmental stages and how those impact who we are in the future and how we see things, tends to be going into those moments that, here's an example. I saw this old lady and this older woman in a video recently, and she said, my mother told me that I looked like a clown the first time that I put on makeup. And she walked into the room and she said, "You look just like a clown." And that's the way she said it. And this woman, I mean, she probably was in her 80s or 70s. And she said, every time I put a blush on my face, I hear her voice in my head. So no matter how old you are, how long you've been on this planet, there are things that occurred within the psyche of our environment that do impact how we operate today until we recognize it. And also building in an awareness too, and an understanding of why people operated the way that they did. Within this collective. So anyway, what I was going to tell you about is the inner child thing, is then going back, so going in now as the person that you are today, and going back into those spaces in those moments, like if there is a moment like that, like what that lady was talking about, is going back in and being who you needed for yourself in that moment, and going back and nurturing that person and giving them what they needed in that moment, and also reflecting back over this timeline, this pathway. I'm very curious, honestly, if any of you in Collective 3 resonate into the pathway and the journey from Collective 2 to 1 to you. And if any of you have had that sort of timeline and that pathway of a life, if any of you went through where a moment in time where you were in sort of that Scorpion energy, a lot more feisty, a lot more abrasive, a lot more critical, and then moved into a moment of really not being able to see yourself, to then just moving into the space of just giving to others out of a sense of guilt. And so I'm curious if any of you have that pathway, because that is the timeline that exists within this collective anyway, within the collectives in the other spaces. And I personally feel tapped into all of these collectives on different timelines. I don't personally feel as attached into I would say that the Collective 3 space is often, while I resonate into it, I don't think I operate in this space very often. And sometimes, y'all, to be fair with you, Collective 3, I feel as though I could operate, that your space could teach me so much about being more selfless, honestly. So sometimes I tap into the energy of this collective and I feel like I could really use advice in this space. So what's interesting is that I really do feel like you all have a way of being able to help others. And I would argue that some of you should really be looking into your north nodes and seeing what your pathway really is, because you are givers. And so you will pair well in an environment where you are giving to others. But it has to be a space that is like, how is it going to benefit you? Many of you would be, I know some people in this collective, actually, I know some people that resonate into this energy, and I feel like they would be perfect for working with special needs kids, or just in spaces that's so rewarding, you would be great in those environments, and it would do so much for you as an individual as well. And I would not be surprised if there are people already in this collective that do sort of work in maybe environments that are a little bit tougher for others, or have a sense of compassion in those spaces, because you are so selfless and so giving in some ways. But really tapping into the why and understanding, okay, what is it in this space? I really do feel like, and energetically, y'all, you're so powerful, because I think that the major shift in this energetic alignment in this, for this channel, and some of the things that have been occurring, and my feelings, and how the energy has been coming in, and how I've been feeling as a mother and a woman, y'all, it's your energy. It's your energy coming into this space. And I went from one day being so gung-ho on wanting to do connection readings, and then going, I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if this is healthy. This is like so the opposite of what we need to be doing for ourselves. And then I said that, and like the majority of the comments that came in was the group 3 collective, just over and over and over and over. Like, I was in this moment, I was just thinking this, and so many of you were just having this thought process. And like, if that's not proof for energetic alignment, then I don't know what is, because I don't feel that I operate in this space on a consistent basis, but I do feel like I'm surrounded by women who do. Now, I do feel like I behave selflessly in other ways, for sure, hands down, especially within connections. With, like, get me in a space with a man and I just lose everything. I lose all my bearings, like, as I am unhinged in that space. It's just ridiculous. But anyway, but so this would be the energy that I would feel, that just you are, just your presence sometimes, just your presence in a space has the ability to lift things around you. And recognizing that, first of all, that's a superpower. Your ability to do that means that you are healers here. And the best way to be a healer, y'all, is to heal yourselves. And so recognize where, well, first of all, recognize where other people need to make choices for themselves, and it's not your damn problem. One. And recognize where you are really feeling appreciated. And a lot of y'all need to stand up for yourselves. And need to say, some of you keep all your, like, any thought that might just rock the boat a little bit, right? You keep it all tied up inside your head. And you don't say it, because... and it's like... You know, sometimes there are things that people might need to hear. We have the independent. I am aware of my inner dialogue and direct it by positive imagery. I do feel like this is the one thing I do want to say about this space is that I do feel like a good majority of you have been operating so long and not asking anyone else for help ever. And so you're just kind of the helper. It moved you into this independent, highly, hyper independent space. And we have the actor. I know how to act properly and wisely in this situation. The angel. I have faith in my ability to help myself and others. You know what, the actor thing is that I think that y'all, because you care so much about your ability to sort of, or how do I want to say this? Because you care so much about, or have an awareness anyway, of how impactful words are and how that can shift and change the narrative, you actually could deliver messages in sort of a way that would be heard and wouldn't be harmful. And so building into your voice of being able to communicate some of the thoughts that you have or some of the perspectives that you have and really be able to say, you could actually help people more than by keeping it all to yourself. Just FYI. The angel. I have faith in my abilities to help myself and others. Yeah, you know, it's interesting because I really do feel like this collective is a whole lot of y'all are just earth angels, I swear. But you have to recognize the energetic alignment of the world around you as well, collective 3, okay? Is that when you are in certain spaces, you can become the enabler in that world, right? Okay. The warrior. I'm sorry. I don't know, maybe that was a slip on purpose. Perhaps you are warriors, which wouldn't surprise me in this collective. The warrior, anyway, I ask for what I want because I deserve to get what I want. I believe that this collective, out of all the collectives, in fact, within the other spaces, especially in certain collectives, I feel like they're pretty well versed in being selfless or selfish occasionally. You, on the other hand, I feel as though what you could use and what's sort of brewing in the surface, or like beneath the surface here, is to have a little bit more tenacity in going after what you want and finding what you want, and also understanding how many of you have an identity that is completely surrounded by being of service. Who are you in those spaces other than the backbone, right? Well, they all have spinal cords too, y'all. Like, they are living, breathing humans too. And if you're their backbone, then how is it that you are burdening the weight of all those around you? Maybe it's time to let go of the reins a little bit. Okay. The persistent. I hold fast to my goals and ideals as I persevere. Yes. And then get tunnel visioned on choosing yourself more often. All right, group 3. If this resonated with you, please like and subscribe to my channel. Leave me a comment down below. I love reading your comments. Any amount of support that you can provide me in this moment helps my channel tremendously and gets me into a space of hopefully being able to utilize this space to help support my family. Thank you so much for being here, group 3. Enjoy the rest of your day.